Hey Rebel EM followers, I wanted to make a quick video on how I handle hypoxemia and the patient that needs to be intubated. So I'll tell you that pretty much for every intubation, whether a patient's hypoxemic or not, I will always put them on two oxygen sources. They will be on a nasal cannula at 15 liters per minute and then a non-rebreather at flush rate oxygen. So what do I actually mean by flush rate oxygen? Well, here's our O2 flow meter, and as most of you know that when you turn the little green knob, there's a little black ball or silver ball that goes up and pretty much tells you the liters of flow. If you continue to turn that thing all the way up past the 15 till it won't turn anymore, that's what I mean by flush rate. You're actually going to achieve 30 to 45 liters per minute depending on your wall source of oxygen and the facility that you work at. So back to what I said is that two sources of oxygen for all intubations. This does your nitrogen washout or denitrogenation and then creates a huge reservoir of oxygen to allow that safe apnea time, even for airways that you think are going to be straightforward and something happens and it ends up being not straightforward. It's just better to be proactive than reactive. So now, with these two oxygen sources, if I get my oxygen saturation greater than 95%, then I'm good to proceed with my intubation. But if for whatever reason, with those two oxygen sources, I am not able to get my oxygen saturation greater than or equal to 95%, I need to start thinking about shunt or dead space physiology going on in the lungs. And these patients don't need more oxygen. They need positive end expiratory pressure. They need PEEP to overcome either the ventilation issue or the arterial flow by the alveoli issue. So why positive end expiratory pressure? Well, my hope is that the PEEP will help recruit atelectatic alveoli. And by recruiting atelectatic alveoli, these are alveoli that are either not participating in gas exchange and ventilation, or it's bypassing where the shunt is actually occurring or where the dead space is actually occurring, so that I can overcome the cause of me not being able to get my oxygen saturation greater than 95%. Now, I used shunt physiology and dead space physiology. And so I just wanted to remind everybody, this is just me kind of nerding out about lung physiology. If we're talking about dead space, what it means is the alveoli or the lungs are working fine. So gas exchange is good, but there's some type of poor perfusion or a VQ mismatch of greater than 1. And typically cardiogenic shock or any type of shock and pulmonary embolism are going to be the things that are affecting your blood flow that are basically creating that dead space. All the way to the right is shunt, which is basically there's something in the lung or in the alveoli that's not allowing gas change to occur despite there being good blood flow. And that would be a VQ mismatch of less than 1. Things like pus in the airways from pneumonia, volume overload from CHF exacerbation or end-stage renal disease and not making urine, so edema, or trauma, patient bleeding and having blood in the airways. And so PEEP overcomes both of these issues by recruiting atelectatic alveoli to overcome whatever the dead space or the shunt is. So in those patients, my next move is I still leave them on the nasal cannula at 15 liters per minute, but now I grab a bag valve mask. And I leave that oxygen at flush rate that I had on the non-rebreather. I've now transitioned that to the bag valve mask. In addition, I will add a PEEP valve at 15 centimeters of water. So what's a PEEP valve? It's this little device that kind of looks like this. The ones I have a red top, but I've seen ones that have a blue top as well. And by twisting the top, you can basically add positive end expiratory pressure, and it ranges from 0 to 20, and I'll turn this sucker until I get to 15. And it attaches at the base of the bag valve mask, and so now I can take that mask, apply it to the patient's face over the nasal cannula, do a nice little jaw thrust, and if the patient's breathing on their own, I don't actually need to bag them. This is called apneic CPAP, continuous positive pressure. And so if they're not breathing, then yes, I can bag them, But most of these patients are going to be breathing on their own. And so all I'm trying to do is just recruit alveoli. And so this is my go-to when I can't get that O2 sat above 95%. So to summarize, if a patient is hypoxemic, even if they're not hypoxemic, nasal cannula at 15 liters per minute, non-rebreather at flush rate. If you get your O2 saturation to greater than 95%, you're good to go ahead and proceed with intubation. Now, in the scenario where I have that and I'm not getting my oxygen saturation greater than 95%, I now swap out that non-rebreather for a bag valve mask at flush rate and a PEEP valve at 15 centimeters of water. I recruit those atelectatic alveoli, and then I proceed with my intubation. So that's how I manage my patients that are hypoxemic that require intubation. I know there's more than one way to kind of solve a problem, but this is what I find to be the most universal, the easiest, and has equipment that pretty much everyone in every institution has. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions. Thank you as always for following along, and until next time.